Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into Thebes, in the fourth nome of Upper Egypt, pulsed with life under the relentless sun of 800 BCE. The Nile's waters shimmered like lapis, cradling the city where Ammonius, the Hidden One, reigned supreme. Neferet, barely 16, stood at the edge of her family's estate, her heart pounding as she gazed toward the towering pylons of Karnak. Today, she would enter the temple of Ammonius as a chantress, a hesed, her voice destined to join the sacred songs that pleased the god who upheld Ma'at, truth, justice, and order. Her mother, Tai, a retired chantress, adjusted the pleated linen of Neferet's dress, her hands steady but her eyes glistening with pride and worry. "You are ready, daughter," Tai said, her voice soft as the reed flutes she once played. "Your voice is Ammonius' gift, trained since you were a child. Sing for him, and he will protect you." Neferet nodded, her fingers tracing the faience amulet of Mut, Ammonius' consort, around her neck. Her mother had taught her the sistrum's clanging rhythms and the manat's swishing cadence, preparing her for this moment. As a girl from an elite Theban family, Neferet's path was set, to serve Ammonius, to honor her lineage, and to wield the rare freedom of an Egyptian woman, able to own land and speak in court. Yet the temple was a world apart, its dark sanctuaries and powerful priests a mystery she both craved and feared. The journey to Karnak was a procession of its own, the family's servants carrying baskets of bread and lotus flowers as offerings. Thebes bustled around them, merchants haggling, children splashing in the Nile's shallows, priests chanting as they prepared for the day's rituals. The precinct of Ammonius loomed ahead, its sandstone walls glowing gold, the hypostyle hall's columns like a forest of stone. Neferet's breath caught as they passed the second pylon, its obelisks piercing the sky, a testament to Seti II's devotion. The air smelled of incense and myrrh, the sacred scent of Ammonius' presence. At the temple gate, a priestess named Merit greeted them, her shaved head adorned with a diadem of turquoise. "Neferet, daughter of Tai," she said, her voice resonant, "you are called to serve Ammonius Re, king of the gods. Have you confessed your sins, as he demands?" "I have," Neferet replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She had spent the previous night in prayer, admitting small jealousies and moments of doubt, ensuring her worthiness to approach the god. Ammonius, the protector of the road, demanded purity, and Neferet had vowed to uphold Ma'at in her heart. Merit led her through the outer court, where statues of rams, Ammonius' sacred animal, guarded the path. The inner sanctuary was cooler, its shadows deep, the air thick with the scent of burning resin. Neferet glimpsed the golden barque of Ammonius, where his statue rested, veiled from all but the highest priests. Her role, Merit explained, was to sing hymns and shake the sistrum during the morning offerings, joining other chantresses from noble families. "Your music soothes Ammonius," Merit said, "and keeps the cosmos in balance. Fail, and chaos stirs." Neferet's training began at once. In a side chamber, she joined 3 other chantresses, their voices blending in a hymn to Ammonius' dawn. Tai stood by, her eyes critical but warm, as Neferet gripped the bronze sistrum, its metal discs clanging in rhythm. The lyrics, carved on temple walls, spoke of Ammonius' power over the 2 lands, his blue skin a symbol of divinity. Neferet's voice faltered at first, but Merit's nod urged her on, and soon her soprano soared, weaving with the others in a harmony that felt like touching the divine. At midday, the high priest of Ammonius, Pinagem, appeared, his leopard-skin robe marking his authority. His gaze swept over Neferet, assessing. "Your mother served well," he said, his voice deep. "The temple owns 2/3 of Egypt's lands, and our chantresses are its voice. Prove your worth, and you may rise, perhaps even to God's wife one day." Neferet's heart leaped at the mention of the title, held by women like Hatshepsut, who wielded power second only to the pharaoh. But the priest's eyes held a warning. The temple was a place of faith and politics, where ambition could be dangerous. As evening fell, Neferet returned home, her body weary but her spirit alight. She stood by the Nile, watching the sun sink, its rays mirroring Ammonius' glory. Her mother joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The temple is your calling," Tai said, "but it is also a burden. The priests of Ammonius rival the pharaoh, and you must tread carefully." Neferet nodded, her amulet warm against her skin. She was no mere servant but a woman of Thebes, with rights to her own wealth and voice. Yet as a chantress she was bound to Ammonius, her songs a thread in the tapestry of Ma'at. The temple's mysteries awaited, and she would face them with courage, her voice her power, her faith her guide. The Sistrum's Song. The dawn light filtered through the hypostyle hall of Karnak, casting long shadows across its forest of columns, each carved with hymns to Ammonius Re. Neferet stood in the temple's outer court, her linen dress clinging to her skin in the morning's heat, her hands gripping a bronze sistrum that gleamed like the sun. At 16, she was a novice chantress, her second day in the temple of Ammonius a whirlwind of awe and effort. The sistrum, a sacred rattle with metal discs, was her voice's partner, its clanging rhythm meant to awaken the god and banish chaos. Beside her, 3 other chantresses, Merit, the senior priestess, Anknes, a sharp-eyed woman of 20, and little Senate, barely 12, prepared for the morning ritual, their manat necklaces swishing with each movement. Merit's voice cut through the hum of the temple. "Neferet, your rhythm falters. The sistrum is Ammonius' heartbeat. Match it to the hymn, or you'll anger him." Her diadem glinted as she shook her own sistrum, its crisp clang echoing off the sandstone walls. Neferet's cheeks burned, but she nodded, adjusting her grip. Her mother, Tai, had drilled her for years, but the temple's grandeur, the towering pylons, the scent of myrrh, the weight of divine eyes, made her hands tremble. She closed her eyes, recalling Tai's lessons. Feel the god's pulse, let it guide you. The hymn began, a low chant praising Ammonius' rise with the sun, and Neferet shook the sistrum, its discs clashing in time with Merit's. Her voice joined the others, a tentative soprano weaving through their harmony, singing of Ammonius' blue skin, his ram-headed power, his dominion over the 2 lands. Anknes smirked as Neferet's rhythm steadied. "Better, novice. But don't think you're a god's wife yet. Keep your eyes down when Pinagem passes." Neferet's heart skipped. The high priest of Ammonius, Pinagem, was a figure of myth, his leopard-skin robe and shaven head marking him as Ammonius' earthly voice. Yesterday he had spoken of her potential, hinting at the title of God's wife, a priestess who served as Ammonius' divine consort, wielding power rivaling the pharaoh's. But Anknes's warning was clear. Ambition in the temple was a double-edged blade, and Neferet was a newcomer in a hierarchy as rigid as the obelisks outside. The ritual ended, and Merit led them to a side chamber for training. The room was small, its walls painted with scenes of chantresses before Ammonius' barque, their sistra raised in worship. Merit handed Neferet a manat, a heavy necklace of turquoise beads that doubled as a rattle. "Shake it gently," she instructed, "to soothe Ammonius' spirit after the offering. Your mother was skilled with it. Don't shame her." Neferet's fingers traced the beads, their cool weight grounding her. Tai had retired as a chantress when Neferet was born, her voice still legendary among Thebes's elite. The family's estate, lush with date palms and barley fields, depended on Neferet's success in the temple, a mark of honor that secured their status. She shook the manat, its soft swish blending with the sistrum's clang, practicing a rhythm for the evening hymn. Senate, the youngest, giggled as her own manat tangled, earning a sharp glance from Merit. "Focus, Senate," Merit said. "Ammonius hears every note. Neferet, you'll join the evening offering today. Stay behind Anknes, and don't stumble." As the day wore on, Neferet's arms ached from practicing, her voice hoarse from chanting. The temple was a city within Thebes, its precincts teeming with priests, scribes, and artisans. She glimpsed the inner sanctuary, where Pinagem and the second prophet purified Ammonius' statue, their voices muffled by the veil. Chantresses, Merit explained, rarely entered the sanctuary. Their role was music and ritual in the outer courts, a sacred but secondary duty. Yet Neferet's heart yearned for more, stirred by Pinagem's words and her mother's tales of Hatshepsut, who had served Ammonius before claiming the throne. At midday, the chantresses ate in a shaded courtyard, sharing bread, figs, and beer brewed by temple servants. Anknes leaned close, her voice low. "You're Thais' daughter, so they'll watch you. Pinagem's kind now, but he's a politician, not a priest. The temple owns half of Egypt's wealth, land, cattle, gold. Cross him, and you'll be cleaning altars, not singing." Neferet's stomach tightened. The priests of Ammonius were powerful, their influence rivaling the pharaohs in Memphis. Her father, a scribe in the House of Life, had warned her, "The temple is a river, swim with its current or drown." She nodded, keeping her eyes on her bread, but her mind raced. Could she rise, as Pinagem suggested, or would she be trapped in the Chantress's ranks, her voice a fleeting echo? As evening approached, Neferet joined the offering ritual, her sistrum gleaming in the torchlight. The court was packed with worshippers, nobles, priests, even a vizier's wife, her wig adorned with lotus flowers. Neferet stood behind Anknes, her heart pounding as Pinagem emerged, his staff tapping the stone. The hymn began, a soaring ode to Ammonius' night journey, and Neferet's voice rose, clear and strong, her sistrum's clang sharp and true. For a moment she felt Ammonius' presence, a warmth that steadied her trembling hands. Pinagem's eyes flicked to her, a brief nod of approval, but Anknes's elbow nudged her sharply. "Don't preen, novice," she hissed. Neferet lowered her gaze, her cheeks warm, but pride swelled within her. She had sung for Ammonius, her voice a thread in the tapestry of Ma'at, the cosmic order that held Egypt together. After the ritual, Merit dismissed them, her voice softer. "Well done, Neferet. Your mother would be proud. Rest now, you'll need strength for the Opet Festival next month." Neferet returned home under a starlit sky, the Nile's ripples reflecting the moon. Tai waited by the estate's gate, her face anxious. "How was it, daughter? Did you honor Ammonius?" "I did," Neferet said, her voice steady. "Pinagem noticed me, but Anknes says to be cautious. The temple's not just prayers, it's power." Thais' eyes darkened, her hand touching Neferet's amulet of Mut. "She's right. The priests of Ammonius hold Thebes' heart and the pharaoh's leash. Sing well, but guard your ambition. You're a woman of Egypt. Your voice is yours, but your path is narrow." Neferet nodded, her fingers tracing the sistrum's handle, still warm from her grip. The temple was a world of beauty and danger, its rhythms her calling, its politics her challenge. She was a chantress now, her voice Ammonius' gift, but her future was unwritten. As she lay in her reed bed, the sistrum's song echoed in her dreams, a promise of glory and a warning of the trials ahead. The House of Eternity. The pre-dawn air of Thebes was cool and heavy with the scent of the Nile as Neferet made her way to the temple of Ammonius at Karnak, her sistrum tucked under her arm, its bronze discs silent for now. At 16, she was a week into her role as a chantress, a hezit, her voice and rhythms dedicated to pleasing Ammonius Re, the hidden one who upheld Ma'at, the cosmic order. The stars still glittered above, mirroring the torchlight that flickered along the avenue of ram-headed sphinxes leading to the temple's second pylon. Neferet's heart quickened with each step, the weight of her duty mingling with a quiet pride. Today she would join the daily offering ritual, singing hymns and shaking her sistrum as priests presented bread and incense to Ammonius' statue in the inner sanctuary, a moment of divine communion she had only glimpsed before. At the temple gate, Merit, the senior chantress, greeted her with a nod, her turquoise diadem catching the torchlight. "Neferet, you're early." "Good. The god demands precision. Follow Anknes to the purification pool, then join us in the outer court." Neferet bowed, her linen dress brushing the stone. She followed Anknes, the sharp-eyed chantress who had warned her of the temple's politics, to a small courtyard where a pool shimmered under the fading stars. The water was cold as Neferet dipped her hands and feet, whispering a prayer to wash away impurities. Anknes, already purified, adjusted her manat necklace, its beads clinking softly. "Don't dawdle, novice," she said, her voice low. "The high priest watches today, and he's no patience for mistakes." Neferet's stomach tightened. Pinagem, the high priest of Ammonius, was a towering figure, his authority over the temple's vast wealth, lands, cattle, gold, matched only by his spiritual power. Her mother, Tai, had urged caution. Sing for Ammonius, but tread lightly among men. As a woman of Egypt, Neferet held rights rare in the ancient world. She could own property, divorce, and speak in court, her status secured by her elite family and temple roll. Yet within Karnak's walls, her freedom was curtailed, her every note and step bound by ritual and hierarchy. In the outer court, Neferet joined Merit, Anknes, and Little Senate, their sistra gleaming in the torchlight. The hypostyle hall loomed beyond, its 134 columns etched with hymns and images of pharaohs offering to Ammonius. The air was thick with myrrh, its smoke curling from braziers tended by lower priests. Merit handed Neferet a small censer of burning incense, its warmth stinging her fingers. "Offer this with your hymn," she said. "Your voice and the smoke rise together, pleasing Ammonius Ka." The ritual began as the first light of dawn touched the temple's pylons. Two priests, their heads shaven and bodies oiled, carried Ammonius' golden statue from the inner sanctuary to a small shrine in the court, its veil shielding the god's face from all but the initiated. Neferet's breath caught at the sight, her role suddenly real. Her music would bridge the mortal and divine, ensuring Ammonius' favor for Egypt. The hymn started, a low chant praising Ammonius' creation of the Nile, and Neferet shook her sistrum, its clang sharp and steady, matching Merit's rhythm. Her voice rose, a clear soprano weaving through the others, singing of the god's ram-headed strength, his breath that stirred the cosmos. As she swung the censer, the incense smoke spiraled upward, a fragrant offering to Ammonius' spirit. Neferet's arms ached, but her focus held, her eyes fixed on the shrine. Pinagem stood nearby, his leopard skin robe glinting, his staff tapping the stone in time with the hymn. His gaze lingered on her, and Neferet felt a flush of pride and fear. Anknes's warning echoed, "Keep your eyes down." She lowered her gaze, her sistrum's rhythm unwavering, her voice steady despite the high priest's scrutiny. The ritual ended, the statue returned to its sanctuary, and Merit dismissed the chantresses to rest. Neferet lingered in the court, watching priests sweep the stone, their movements as precise as her own. Senate tugged her sleeve, her eyes wide. "Did you feel him, Neferet? Ammonius was here, I know it." Neferet smiled, her heart softening. "I felt something, Senate. Perhaps it was his Ka, or perhaps our songs." She thought of her rights outside the temple, her share of her family's estate, her ability to sign contracts or reject a suitor. Yet here, she was a servant of Ammonius, her voice her power, her freedom bound by duty. The contrast stirred her, a quiet rebellion she buried beneath her faith. At midday, Neferet sat with the chantresses in the shaded courtyard, sharing a meal of barley bread, onions, and beer. Anknes leaned close, her voice a whisper. "Pinagem noticed you again. Be careful, Neferet. He sees your mother's skill in you, but he also sees a tool. The temple's wealth grows, and he needs loyal voices." Neferet's fingers tightened on her cup. Her father had spoken of the priests' power, their control over 2/3 of Egypt's farmland, their rivalry with the pharaoh in Memphis. As a chantress, she was a small piece in their game, her music a symbol of Ammonius' favor, her loyalty a prize. "I sing for Ammonius, not Pinagem," she said, her voice firm. Anknes snorted. "Say that when he offers you a higher title. The god's wife of Ammonius lives like a queen, but she's his puppet." Neferet's heart raced at the mention of the title, held by women like Shepenwepet, who served as Ammonius' divine consort, their role symbolic, not sexual, a bridge to the god's power. Could she rise so high, or would ambition trap her in Pinagem's web? She pushed the thought aside, focusing on her beer, its bitter tang grounding her. As evening fell, Neferet returned home, her body weary but her mind alive. The Nile glittered under the moon, its waters the lifeblood of Thebes. Tai waited by the estate's garden, her face soft. "How was the ritual, daughter? Did Ammonius hear you?" "He did," Neferet said, her sistrum resting on her lap. "But Pinagem watches me, and Anknes says he seeks loyalty, not just songs. I'm a woman of Egypt, mother, free to own land, to speak. Why does the temple feel like a cage?" Thais' eyes darkened, her hand touching Neferet's amulet of Mut. "The temple is a mirror of Egypt, freedom and chains together. Your rights are yours, but Ammonius' service demands sacrifice. Sing for him, not for Pinagem, and you'll find your path." Neferet nodded, her fingers tracing the sistrum's discs. The temple was her calling, its rituals her purpose, but its politics were a labyrinth. She was a chantress, her voice a gift to Ma'at, but her heart yearned for more, a place where her freedom and faith could coexist. As she lay in her bed, the hymn's melody lingered, a promise of divine harmony and a challenge to forge her own destiny. The Festival of Opet. The Nile sparkled under the midday sun, its waters a ribbon of life through Thebes, as Neferet stood among the chantresses of Ammonius in the outer court of Karnak. At 16, a month into her role as a Hesed, she felt the weight of her sistrum like a sacred anchor, its bronze discs gleaming in the heat of 800 BCE. Today was the first day of the Opet Festival, when Ammonius Re, Mut, and Khonsu, the Theban triad, would travel in their golden barques from Karnak to Luxor, renewing the pharaoh's divine power and uniting Egypt in worship. Neferet's heart raced with anticipation. As a chantress, she would join the procession, her voice and rhythms honoring Ammonius' journey across the Nile, a spectacle that drew thousands to Thebes's sacred precincts. Merit, the senior chantress, adjusted Neferet's pleated linen dress, her turquoise diadem catching the light. "Stay close to Anknes," she instructed, her voice firm. "You'll carry a fan for Ammonius' barque, and shake your sistrum when I signal. The pharaoh himself joins us at Luxor. Mind your steps, or you'll shame us." Neferet nodded, her fingers tightening on the sistrum. The pharaoh, Amenhotep III, was a distant figure, his palace in Memphis a world away, but as chief priest of Ammonius, he would lead the rituals at Luxor, offering to the god who crowned him. Anknes, standing nearby, smirked. "Don't gape at the king, novice. He's mortal, even if Pinagem acts like he's Ammonius' equal." Her words carried a barb, hinting at the high priest's growing influence, a tension Neferet had sensed in whispered warnings from her mother, Tai. The court buzzed with preparations, priests purifying the barques with incense, artisans garlanding the ram-headed statues with lotus flowers. Neferet glimpsed Ammonius' barque, a cedar-wood vessel inlaid with gold, its veiled shrine hiding the god's statue. Her role was minor, fanning the barque to cool the god's ka, shaking her sistrum to ward off chaos, but the honor thrilled her. Little Senet, the youngest chantress, bounced on her toes, her manat necklace jingling. "Will we see the pharaoh's crown, Neferet? The double one, red and white." Neferet smiled, her nerves easing. "Perhaps, Senate. But we sing for Ammonius, not for crowns. Yet her heart fluttered at the thought of the festival's grandeur, a celebration that bound Thebes's people to their gods and king. As the sun climbed, the procession began, the barques of Ammonius, Mut, and Khonsu carried on priests' shoulders through Karnak's second pylon. Neferet followed Anknes, her ostrich feather fan raised, her sistrum clanging in rhythm with Merit's hymn. The chantresses' voices soared, praising Ammonius' journey to renew creation, their harmony blending with the crowd's cheers. Thebes thronged the avenue of sphinxes, nobles in pleated kilts, farmers with palm fronds, children waving reeds. The air was thick with myrrh and the scent of roasted goose, offerings piled high for the gods. At the Nile's edge, the barques were loaded onto gilded barges, their sails catching the breeze. Neferet boarded a smaller vessel with the chantresses, her fan steady as she sang, her eyes wide at the flotilla stretching across the river. Barges bore priests, musicians, and nobles, while fishermen in reed boats shouted blessings. The Luxor temple loomed ahead, its sandstone walls glowing, a smaller but no less sacred mirror of Karnak. Neferet's voice faltered as she saw the pharaoh's barge, its prow carved with a falcon, Amenhotep III standing tall in the double crown, his crook and flail gleaming. Anknes nudged her. "Sing, novice, or Merit'll have your hide." Neferet refocused, her sistrums clang sharp, her soprano weaving through the hymn. The crowd on the Luxor bank roared as the barques docked, priests carrying them into the temple's court. Neferet followed, her fan raised, her heart pounding as Pinagem, in his leopard-skin robe, greeted the pharaoh. The high priest's staff tapped the stone, his voice booming a prayer to Ammonius, but his eyes flicked to Amenhotep, a subtle challenge Neferet couldn't ignore. Inside Luxor's sanctuary, the pharaoh offered incense and wine to Ammonius' statue, his movements precise, his role as intermediary between god and man palpable. Neferet stood with the chantresses, their hymn softening to a lullaby, soothing the god's ka after the journey. The air was heavy with resin, the torchlight casting shadows on walls carved with scenes of divine birth. For a moment, Neferet felt Ammonius' presence, a warmth that steadied her trembling hands, her music a thread in Egypt's eternal harmony. As the ritual ended, the crowd feasted outside, music and laughter filling the night. Neferet sat with Senate, sharing figs and beer, her body weary but her spirit alight. Merit approached, her face softer. "You did well, Neferet. Your voice carried Ammonius' favor. Rest tomorrow. The festival lasts 11 days, and you'll sing again." Neferet bowed, her heart swelling. She glanced at Pinagem, deep in conversation with the pharaoh's vizier, their gestures tense. Anknes's warning echoed. The temple's wealth, 2/3 of Egypt's lands, made Pinagem a rival to the king. Neferet's role was sacred, but it was also a piece in their game, her loyalty to Ammonius tested by human ambition. Returning home by barge, Neferet stood by the Nile, the moon silvering the water. Tai waited at the estate, her eyes searching. "The festival, daughter. How was it?" "Glorious," Neferet said, her sistrum resting in her hands. "I saw the pharaoh, felt Ammonius' ka. But Pinagem, he watches the king like a hawk. Anknes says he seeks power, not just prayer." Tai's face tightened, her hand touching Neferet's amulet of Mut. "The Opet binds Egypt, but it also shows its cracks. The priests grow bold, their wealth a crown of their own. Sing for Ammonius, Neferet, but guard your heart. You're a woman of Thebes, free, but not untouchable." Neferet nodded, her fingers tracing the sistrum's discs. The festival had shown her Ammonius' glory and Thebes's unity, but also the temple's undercurrents, where faith and power intertwined. She was a chantress, her voice a gift to Ma'at, but her path was fraught with choices: loyalty to Ammonius, caution with Pinagem, pride in her freedom as a woman. As she lay in her reed bed, the hymn's melody lingered, a celebration of divine order and a reminder of the mortal tensions she must navigate. Whispers in stone. The evening air in Thebes was thick with the scent of burning resin as Neferet slipped through the shadowed corridors of Karnak's temple of Amun, her manat necklace tucked beneath her linen dress to silence its beads. At 16, she was a chantress of 2 months, her voice a daily offering to Amun, the god who wove ma'at, truth and order, through Egypt's heart. The Opet Festival's splendor still lingered in her mind, the Nile's golden barges, the pharaoh's prayers, the roar of Thebes united. Yet tonight, the temple's grandeur felt oppressive, its hypostyle hall's columns looming like sentinels guarding secrets. Neferet had been called to retrieve a forgotten sistrum from a ritual chamber, but as she neared, hushed voices stopped her, their tone heavy with defiance. She crouched behind a statue of a ram, Amun's sacred animal, its stone cool against her palm. Through a doorway, she saw Pinagem, the high priest, his leopard-skin robe draped over broad shoulders, speaking to a scribe and a priest named Menkaper, their faces taut. Amenhotep grows old, Pinagem said, his voice a low growl. His Memphis court is a fading star. Our temple holds Egypt's wealth, granaries, herds, mines. Why kneel to a pharaoh who wanes? Neferet's breath caught, her heart thudding against her ribs. Pinagem's words challenged Amenhotep III, whose double crown she had seen at Luxor, his offerings to Ammonius binding king to God. Menkaper, his shaven head gleaming, hesitated. The pharaoh's son, Akhenaten, speaks of a new god, the Aten, a sun disk above all others. His letters reach Thebes, stirring scribes. If he ascends. Pinagem's staff struck the floor, a sharp crack. Akhenaten's a dreamer, his Aten a whim. We'll fortify Ammonius' cult, more lands, grander festivals. Thebes sings our hymns, not his. Let the boy try to break us. Neferet's fingers dug into the statue's base, her mind reeling. Akhenaten's name was a shadow, his Aten a threat to Ammonius, whose blue-skinned might she served. As a chantress, her role was sacred, her sistrums clang, her voices soar, a shield against chaos. Yet Pinagem's ambition cast a shadow over her faith, hinting at a Thebes where priests rivaled kings. If Ammonius' cult faltered, her place, her family's honor, could crumble like sandstone under time. She retreated, her sandals whispering on the stone, and reached the outer court where Merit waited with Anknes and Senet, their torches casting pools of light. Merit's eyes narrowed. "You took long, Neferet." "The sistrum." Neferet held it up, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Found it, Merit." The chamber was cluttered. Anknes's gaze lingered, her smirk knowing, but Senet's eager smile eased Neferet's tension. They practiced a chant for the harvest offering, Neferet's soprano blending with Merit's alto, her sistrum's rhythm crisp. Yet Pinagem's words echoed, drowning the hymn's peace. Akhenaten, Aten, a new god rising. After practice, Merit dismissed them, her voice stern but kind. "Your voice strengthens, Neferet, but your eyes wander. Ammonius sees your heart. Keep it pure." Neferet bowed, her cheeks warm, and joined Anknes by the temple gate, where they sipped beer from clay cups. Senet skipped ahead, humming, but Anknes leaned close, her voice a hiss. "You heard them, didn't you? Pinagem's not subtle. Spill it, novice, or I'll guess." Neferet's pulse quickened. Anknes's sharpness was a blade, her loyalty to the temple unclear. "Just priests arguing over grain," she said, her fingers tracing her amulet of mut. "Nothing for us." Anknes laughed, low and bitter. "Grain? Pinagem counts gold, not barley. The temple's richer than the pharaoh, and he knows it. But Akhenaten's whispers reach Thebes, a sun god, know Ammonius, know us. Choose your side carefully, Thais' daughter." Neferet's throat tightened. Anknes's words confirmed her fears. The temple was a battleground, Ammonius' glory pitted against a new divinity. As a woman of Egypt, Neferet held freedoms, her share of her family's estate, her right to reject a suitor, her voice in court. Yet as a chantress, her fate was Ammonius, her future fragile if Pinagem's power or Akhenaten's reforms prevailed. She thought of her father, a scribe in the temple's house of life, and her mother, whose chants had shaped her path. Their pride was her burden, their legacy her chain. At home, Neferet found Tai by the estate's pool, lotus flowers floating in the moonlight. Her mother's face softened, then hardened at Neferet's silence. "What weighs you, daughter? Your hands clutch that sistrum like a shield." Neferet sank beside her, the words spilling out. "Pinagem speaks against the pharaoh, mother. He says Amenhotep weakens, and his son, Akhenaten, worships the Aten, not Ammonius. If the temple falls, what am I?" Tai's eyes flashed, her voice low. "Pinagem's ambition grows like papyrus in the marsh. The priests control Thebes's heart, their wealth a rival throne. Akhenaten's Aten is a distant threat, but a real one. Thebes has stood for Ammonius 1,000 years, yet gods have fallen before." Neferet's fingers traced the sistrum's discs, their clink a faint echo. "I sing for Ma'at, for Ammonius' order. If Pinagem or Akhenaten breaks it, what's my voice worth?" Tai cupped her face, her touch firm. "Your voice is yours, Neferet, a woman's right, a chantress's gift. Ammonius' temple is your stage, but not your soul. Watch Pinagem, avoid his webs, and sing for the god, not the priest." Neferet nodded, her heart steadied but heavy. The temple was her sanctuary, its rituals her purpose, but its politics were a storm brewing. Pinagem's defiance, Akhenaten's heresy, they threatened the Ma'at she served. She thought of her freedoms, her land, her choices, rare gifts in a world where women often knelt. Yet her role bound her to Ammonius' fate, her future a hymn unwritten. In her bed, Neferet stared at the ceiling, moonlight painting reeds across the plaster. The harvest hymn lingered, a prayer for abundance, but her thoughts were of scarcity, of faith, of power, of certainty. She prayed to Ammonius, her amulet warm, vowing to sing with strength, to navigate the shadows of Thebes, and to hold her place in a world where gods and men clashed for eternity. The god's wife. The morning sun bathed Karnak's precinct of Ammonius Re in gold, its towering columns casting striped shadows across the stone as Neferet adjusted her linen dress, her sistrum heavy in her hand. At 16, 3 months into her role as a chantress in 800 BCE, she had grown accustomed to the temple's rhythms, the clang of her sistrum, the soar of her hymns, the weight of serving Ammonius, the hidden one who upheld Ma'at. The Opet Festival had shown her Thebes's unity, but Pinagem's whispered defiance against the pharaoh, and rumors of Akhenaten's Aten, had stirred unease. Today, Neferet was summoned to a rare honor, assisting in a ritual led by Shepenwepet, the god's wife of Ammonius, a priestess whose divine role made her a queen in all but name. Neferet's heart fluttered with awe and ambition, tempered by Anknes's warnings of the temple's political webs. Merit, the senior chantress, met Neferet at the second pylon, her turquoise diadem glinting. "You'll carry incense for Shepenwepet's offering," she said, her voice crisp. "Stay silent unless spoken to. The god's wife is Ammonius' consort. Her presence is sacred, her power unmatched." Neferet nodded, her fingers tracing her amulet of Mut, Ammonius' divine mother. She had heard tales of the god's wife, a woman chosen from noble or royal blood to serve as Ammonius' earthly bride, her rituals ensuring Egypt's fertility and order. Unlike chantresses, who sang in the outer courts, the god's wife entered the inner sanctuary, her touch purifying the god's statue. Neferet's mother, Tai, had spoken of Hatshepsut, a god's wife who became pharaoh, her legacy carved in Karnak stones. Could Neferet dream so high, or was she bound to the Chantress's ranks? In a side chamber, Neferet joined Anknes and Senet, their manat necklaces tucked away to avoid distracting clinks. A cedarwood censer, etched with lotus flowers, was handed to Neferet, its embers glowing with myrrh. Anknes's eyes narrowed. "Don't drop it, novice." Shepenwepet's gaze is sharper than Pynagem's, and she answers to no one but Ammonius. Neferet's stomach tightened, but she followed Merit to the inner court, where Shepenwepet waited. The god's wife was a vision, her linen robe pleated with gold, her wig adorned with a vulture headdress, her eyes lined with kohl that gleamed like obsidian. At 30, she carried the weight of divinity, her movements graceful as she prepared to enter the sanctuary. Neferet's breath caught. Shepenwepet was no mere priestess but a living goddess, her role a bridge between mortal and divine. The ritual began, the air thick with incense as Shepenwepet led the chantresses in a hymn to Ammonius' creation. Neferet swung her censer, the myrrh smoke curling upward, her sistrum silent to honor the god's wife's voice, a rich alto that filled the court. The hymn spoke of Ammonius' breath shaping the Nile, his ram-headed might guarding Egypt. Neferet's soprano joined softly, her eyes fixed on Shepenwepet, who entered the sanctuary alone, the veil closing behind her. Merit whispered, "She offers wine and linen to Ammonius Ka, a wife's gift to her god. We sing to support her." Neferet's heart swelled with wonder. The god's wife's role was divine, not carnal, a sacred union with Ammonius' spirit, not his body. Yet Anknes's earlier words lingered, "She's Pynagem's puppet." Was Shepenwepet truly free, or did the high priest's ambition bind her as it threatened Neferet? As the hymn ended, Shepenwepet emerged, her face serene, and beckoned Neferet forward. "You, with the censer, what is your name?" Neferet bowed, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Neferet, daughter of Tai, God's wife. I am a chantress, honored to serve you." Shepenwepet's eyes softened, a faint smile touching her lips. "Tai's daughter?" Your mother's voice was Ammonius' joy. Your incense pleased him today. Tell me, do you seek more than the sistrum's song? Neferet's breath caught, her ambition stirring. I seek to serve Ammonius, to uphold Ma'at. Your role, it inspires me, God's wife. Shepenwepet's smile faded, her voice low. This role is a crown and a chain. I am Ammonius' bride, but also Thebes' mother, my wealth and lands vast. Yet I serve the temple's will, Pynagem's will. Choose your path wisely, Neferet. Neferet's heart sank, Shepenwepet's words echoing Anknes's warnings. The god's wife wielded power, estates, scribes, influence rivaling the pharaoh's, but her freedom was bound by the priests. Neferet thought of her own rights as a woman of Egypt, to own land, to divorce, to speak in court. Yet as a chantress, her ambitions were tethered to Karnak's hierarchy, her dreams of rising shadowed by Pynagem's control. The ritual ended, and Merit led the chantresses to rest in the shaded courtyard, where they shared bread and figs. Senet, wide-eyed, whispered, "Shepenwepet spoke to you, Neferet. Will you be God's wife one day?" Neferet smiled, masking her unease. "Perhaps, Senet. But I'm content to sing for now." Anknes snorted, her voice low. "Content? Your Thais daughter. Pynagem sees you as a tool, like Shepenwepet. Her lands fund his schemes, not just Ammonius' altars." Neferet's fingers tightened on her cup, her mind racing. Shepenwepet's power was divine, her role sacred, but her warning revealed a truth. Even the god's wife was entangled in the temple's politics. Neferet's role was smaller, her voice a thread in Ma'at's tapestry, but the same webs threatened her. At home, Neferet found Tai by the estate's pool, her hands weaving a reed mat. Her mother's eyes searched hers. "You met Shepenwepet, daughter. What did you see?" Neferet sank beside her, her voice low. She's Ammonius' bride, mother, powerful but bound. She warned me, her role is a chain, tied to Pinagem. I want to serve Ammonius, but not as his pawn. Thais' hands stilled, her voice firm. The god's wife is a symbol, Neferet, not a slave. Her wealth is hers, her voice divine, but Pinagem's shadow is long. You're a woman of Egypt, free to choose, to own, to speak. Sing for Ammonius, but guard your ambitions from men who would use them. Neferet nodded, her amulet of mut warm against her skin. The temple was her calling, its rituals her purpose, but Shepenwepet's life revealed its limits. She was a chantress, her voice a gift to Ammonius, but her heart yearned for a path where freedom and faith could align. As she lay in her bed, the hymn's melody lingered, a prayer for Ma'at and a challenge to navigate the temple's divine and mortal currents. The beautiful festival of the valley. The Theban air shimmered with heat as Neferet stood in the outer court of Karnak, her sistrum gleaming under the midday sun of 800 BCE. At 16, 4 months into her role as a chantress, she had woven her voice into Ammonius' worship, her rhythms a thread in Ma'at's tapestry. The Opet Festival had shown her Thebes' unity, and her meeting with Shepenwepet, the god's wife of Ammonius, had revealed the temple's power and chains. Today, Neferet would join the beautiful festival of the valley, a procession across the Nile to Deir el-Bahari, where Ammonius' barque would honor the dead in their eternal tombs. Her heart thrummed with anticipation, stirred by tales of Hatshepsut, the woman pharaoh whose mortuary temple stood as a testament to feminine strength. Merit, the senior chantress, adjusted Neferet's pleated linen dress, her voice sharp. You'll carry a lotus offering and sing with Anknes. The festival binds the living to the dead. Your hymn must be flawless, or their caste will wander. Neferet nodded, her fingers tightening on the sistrum, its bronze discs cool despite the heat. The festival was a sacred duty, uniting Thebes in reverence for ancestors, and Neferet felt its weight. Her music would guide souls to peace. Anknes stood nearby, her manat necklace tucked away, her eyes glinting with her usual sharpness. "Don't stumble, novice," she said, smirking. "The nobles watch, and Pinagem's eyes are everywhere. Hatshepsut's temple is grand, but it's no place for mistakes." Neferet's stomach tightened. Pinagem, the high priest, had spoken of her potential, but his ambition, rivaling the pharaoh's, cast a shadow over her role. She thought of Shepenwepet's warning, a crown and a chain. Even Hatshepsut, a god's wife before her throne, had navigated such webs. In the hypostyle hall, priests prepared Ammonius' golden barque, its cedarwood frame garlanded with lotus and papyrus. Neferet joined the chantresses, clutching a bundle of lotus flowers, their petals soft against her skin. Little Senet, her eyes wide, whispered, "Will we see Hatshepsut's tomb, Neferet? My mother says she was Ammonius' favorite." Neferet smiled, her nerves easing. Her temple, Senet, not her tomb. Hatshepsut built it to honor Ammonius and her Ka. We'll sing for her today. She felt a kinship with Hatshepsut, a woman who had risen from priestess to pharaoh, her legacy etched in Deir el-Bahari's cliffs. The procession began, Ammonius' barque carried by priests through Karnak's pylons, the crowd parting like the Nile's waters. Neferet followed Anknes, her sistrum clanging in rhythm with Merit's hymn, a soaring ode to Ammonius' journey to the west, where the dead rested. Thebes thronged the avenue, nobles in pleated wigs, farmers with palm fronds, children scattering petals. The air was thick with myrrh and the scent of roasted barley, offerings for the gods and the departed. Neferet's voice rose, her soprano clear, her lotus held high as they reached the Nile. Barges waited, their sails painted with Ammonius' ram, and Neferet boarded with the chantresses, her lotus offering cradled in her arms. The Nile sparkled, its current gentle, as the flotilla crossed to the west bank. Deir el-Bahari's cliffs rose ahead, Hatshepsut's temple a marvel of terraces and colonnades, its walls carved with scenes of her divine birth. Neferet's heart swelled. Hatshepsut had been a god's wife, like Shepenwepet, her power rooted in Ammonius' favor. Could Neferet, a mere chantress, leave such a mark? At the temple, priests set Ammonius' barque in a courtyard, its shrine veiled. Neferet placed her lotus on an altar, joining the chantresses in a hymn to the dead, their voices softening to a lullaby. The lyrics spoke of Ammonius guiding caste to the field of reeds, where eternity bloomed. Neferet's sistrum clanged softly, her eyes tracing Hatshepsut's reliefs, her journey to Punt, her crown as pharaoh. The temple's grandeur stirred her, a testament to a woman who defied limits, yet Shepenwepet's words echoed, even great power came with chains. Pinagem led the prayers, his leopard skin robe glinting, his voice booming as he offered wine to Ammonius. Neferet noticed his glance toward a noblewoman, likely a royal envoy, her presence a reminder of the pharaoh's distant court. Anknes whispered, "Pinagem courts favor here, too. Hatshepsut's shadow strengthens him. Her temple proves Ammonius might over kings." Neferet's heart sank. The festival was sacred, but politics wove through it, Pinagem using Hatshepsut's legacy to bolster his own. As a woman of Egypt, Neferet held freedoms, land, contracts, a voice in court, but as a chantress, she was a thread in the temple's tapestry, her ambitions tethered to its will. She thought of Hatshepsut, who had transcended such bounds, and wondered if she could find her own path. The ritual ended, and the crowd feasted by the cliffs, music and laughter rising under the stars. Neferet sat with Senet, sharing dates and beer, her body weary but her spirit alight. Merit approached, her face softened. "Your hymn was strong, Neferet. Hatshepsut's Ka heard you, I'm sure. Rest tomorrow, the festival continues, and you'll sing again." Neferet bowed, her heart warm but heavy. She glanced at Pinagem, now speaking with priests, his gestures commanding. The festival had shown her Ammonius' grace and Thebes's reverence, but also the temple's undercurrents, where faith and power clashed. She thought of her mother, Tai, whose chants had inspired her, and her father, whose pride in her temple role was her anchor. Returning home by barge, Neferet stood by the Nile, its waters silver under the moon. Tai waited at the estate's garden, her eyes searching. "The festival, daughter, did you feel the dead's peace?" "I did," Neferet said, her sistrum resting in her hands. "Hatshepsut's temple is glorious, mother, but Pinagem uses it for power. I want to honor Ammonius, like she did, but not as his pawn." Tai's hand touched Neferet's amulet of Mut, her voice firm. Hatshepsut was Ammonius' voice, but also her own. "You're a woman of Egypt, Neferet, free to choose, to rise. Sing for Maat, but carve your own path, beyond Pinagem's shadow." Neferet nodded, her heart stirred by Hatshepsut's legacy. The festival had bound her to Thebes's past, but its politics threatened her future. She was a chantress, her voice a gift to Ammonius, but her dreams echoed a woman who had ruled. As she lay in her reed bed, the hymn's melody lingered, a prayer for the dead and a vow to find her own strength in a Thebes of gods and ambition. The weight of Maat. The air in Karnak's outer court was thick with the scent of myrrh as Neferet adjusted her sistrum, its bronze discs catching the dawn light of 800 BCE. At 16, 5 months into her role as a chantress, she had woven her voice into the temple's rituals, her hymns a thread in Maat's tapestry of truth and order. The beautiful festival of the valley had deepened her reverence for Ammonius and her kinship with Hatshepsut's legacy, but Pinagem's ambition and whispers of Akhenaten's Aten haunted her thoughts. Today, a shadow fell closer. Anknes, the sharp-eyed chantress who had guided and taunted her, stood accused of stealing temple offerings, a crime that could shatter their sisterhood and test Neferet's commitment to Maat. Merit summoned the chantresses to a side chamber, her turquoise diadem glinting. her face grim. "A linen offering, marked for Ammonius' statue, is missing," she announced, her voice cutting through the morning's hush. "It was seen in Anknes's keeping last night. She denies theft, but Pinagem will judge her today. Speak what you know, or hold your peace." Nefret's heart sank, her fingers tightening on her sistrum. Anknes stood apart, her eyes defiant but her shoulders tense, her manat necklace absent, a sign of disgrace. Little Senet, wide-eyed, clutched Nefret's arm, whispering, "Anknes wouldn't steal, would she? She's one of us." Nefret's throat tightened. She had seen Anknes last night, lingering near the altar after the evening hymn, her hands brushing a bundle of linen. Neferet had thought nothing of it, distracted by Pinagem's gaze and her own fears of Akhenaten's reforms. But now doubt gnawed at her. Anknes's sharp tongue had warned her of the temple's politics. Pinagem sees you as a tool, but her loyalty to the Chantresses was fierce. Could she have taken the linen, perhaps to sell for her struggling family? Or was this a trap, set by rivals in the temple's hierarchy? Merit's eyes fixed on Neferet. "You were with Anknes last night, Neferet. Did you see her near the offerings?" Neferet's pulse raced. Ma'at demanded truth, but accusing Anknes could banish her from the temple, stripping her of honor and livelihood. As a woman of Egypt, Neferet knew the weight of such a loss. Anknes, like her, held rights to property and voice, but her family's modest means relied on her temple role. Silence, though, could taint Neferet's own reputation, marking her as complicit in a crime against Ammonius. She thought of her mother, Tai, whose chance had taught her justice, and Shepenwepet, the god's wife, whose power came with chains. "I saw her near the altar," Neferet said, her voice low but steady. "She touched the linen, but I didn't see her take it." Her words were careful, a balance of truth and mercy, but Anknes's eyes flashed with betrayal, her lips tightening. Merit nodded, her face unreadable. "Pinagem will hear this. Prepare for the morning ritual. Anknes, you'll stay here." The Chantresses dispersed, Senet's hand trembling in Neferet's as they purified at the temple pool. "You told on her," Senet whispered, her voice breaking. "What if they send her away?" Neferet's heart ached. "I spoke the truth, Senet. Ma'at demands it. But I didn't accuse her. I only said what I saw." Yet doubt lingered. Had her words condemned Anknes, or protected her from worse assumptions? In the hypostyle hall, Neferet joined the morning ritual. Her sistrums clang hollow as her thoughts churned. The hymn praised Ammonius' justice, but her voice faltered, her eyes straying to Pinagem, who stood by the shrine, his leopard skin robe glinting. After the offering, he summoned the Chantresses to the inner court, Anknes standing before him, her head high despite her trembling hands. "Anknes, daughter of Neb," Pinagem said, his voice resonant, "you are accused of stealing Ammonius' linen, a sin against Ma'at. Neferet saw you near the altar. Speak." Anknes's voice was sharp, unbroken. "I touched the linen to adjust it, high priest. I took nothing. The altar was crowded. Others could have acted." Her eyes flicked to Neferet, a mix of defiance and plea. Pinagem's gaze turned to Neferet, piercing. "You spoke of her touch, Neferet. Did you see theft, or do you vouch for her?" Neferet's breath caught, the weight of Ma'at pressing on her. To vouch for Anknes risked her own standing. To accuse her could ruin a sister. She thought of Hatshepsut, who had balanced power and justice, and Shepenwepet, bound by the temple's will. "I saw her touch the linen, high priest," she said, her voice clear. "But I saw no theft. Others were near, servants, priests. I trust Anknes's heart for Ammonius." A murmur rippled through the court, and Pinagem's eyes narrowed, weighing her words. "Your trust is noted, Neferet. Anknes, You'll remain under watch until the linen is found. Ma'at will reveal the truth." Anknes was led away, her gaze lingering on Neferet, a mix of gratitude and warning. Marit dismissed the chantresses, her voice stern. "Neferet, you spoke boldly. Pray your right, or Ammonius justice will judge you both." In the shaded courtyard, Neferet sat with Senet, their bread untouched. Senet's eyes glistened. "You saved her, Neferet, but what if Pinagem finds her guilty?" Neferet's heart twisted. "I spoke for Ma'at, Senet. If the linen's found, she'll be free." Yet she feared Pinagem's motives. His ambition, his control over the temple's wealth, could make Anknes a scapegoat to assert his power. At home, Neferet found Ta'i in the estate's garden, her hands sorting barley. Her mother's eyes searched hers. "You look troubled, daughter. What happened in the temple?" Neferet sank beside her, her voice low. "Anknes is accused of stealing linen, mother. I saw her touch it, but I didn't see theft. I spoke the truth to Pinagem, but I fear I've endangered her, or myself." Ta'i's face hardened, her hand touching Neferet's amulet of Mut. "Ma'at is a heavy burden, Neferet. You did right to speak truth, but the temple's justice serves Pinagem's will. Anknes is no thief, I wager. Someone else seeks to weaken the chantresses." Neferet's heart sank, Ta'i's words echoing her fears. The temple was her sanctuary, its rituals her purpose, but its politics were a labyrinth where truth could be twisted. As a woman of Egypt, she held freedoms, land, voice, choice, but as a chantress, her loyalty to Ma'at clashed with the temple's power. She prayed to Ammonius, her sistrum silent, vowing to stand by Anknes, to seek justice, and to navigate the shadows where faith and ambition collided. The Nile's embrace. The late summer sun hung low over Thebes, its rays gilding the Nile's waters as Neferet stood at the edge of her family's estate, a papyrus scroll of accounts in her hands. At 16, 6 months into her role as a chantress of Ammonius, she had woven her voice into Karnak's rituals, her sistrum a heartbeat for Ma'at, the cosmic order. The beautiful festival of the valley had deepened her reverence, and the accusation against Anknes had tested her loyalty to truth. Now, with her month-long respite from temple duties, a privilege granted to chantresses to balance their sacred and worldly lives, Neferet turned to her family's estate, a lush plot of barley fields and date palms that demanded her care. As a woman of Egypt, she held rights to manage land, sign contracts, and speak in court, freedoms that contrasted sharply with the temple's rigid hierarchy. The estate, nestled along the Nile's west bank, was modest but vital, its yield supporting Neferet's parents, Ta'i and Amenemhat, and their household. Ta'i, a retired chantress, met Neferet by the irrigation canal, her hands stained with earth from tending lotus beds. "You're home at last, daughter," she said, her eyes warm but searching. "The temple shapes you, but this land is your root. The harvest is due, and the overseer awaits your word." Neferet nodded, her amulet of Mut warm against her skin. In Karnak, her voice served Ammonius, her steps bound by Pinagem's gaze and the temple's politics. Here, she was a daughter of Thebes, her authority as a landowner unquestioned. She unrolled the scroll, its ink detailing barley yields, tenant rents, and canal repairs. "The eastern field lags," she said, tracing a figure. "The water's low. Has the Shaduf broken again?" Ta'i sighed, leading her to the field where workers hauled buckets under the sun. "The Shaduf holds, but the canal clogs. You'll need to meet the tenants tomorrow. They respect you, Neferet, but they'll test a young woman's resolve." Neferet's heart quickened. Her rights as a woman, rare in lands beyond Egypt, gave her power to negotiate, but the temple's shadow lingered. Pinagem's ambition, Anknes's trial, and whispers of Akhenaten's Aten had stirred fears of a world where Ammonius' cult might falter, threatening her family's status. The estate was her anchor, its wealth tied to her temple roll, a delicate balance she must maintain. At dawn, Neferet met the tenants, a dozen men and women in linen kilts, their faces weathered by the Nile's rhythm. The overseer, Hori, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, presented a dispute. Two tenants claimed the same plot, their voices rising in the morning heat. Neferet stood tall, her voice calm but firm, echoing her mother's training. "Show me the boundary markers," she said, walking the field's edge, her sandals sinking into the rich earth. The stones, carved with her family's seal, confirmed one tenant's claim, and Neferet ruled in her favor, citing the contract's terms. The loser bowed, grudgingly, but Hori's nod held respect. "You've your father's mind," Hori said later, as they reviewed the grain stores. "But the tenants whisper of you as Thais' daughter, the Chantress. Your temple roll gives you weight here." Neferet's chest tightened. Her chants for Ammonius had earned her family honor, but they also bound her to Karnak's fate. She thought of Anknes, still under watch for the stolen linen, her fate unresolved. Had Neferet's testimony, truthful but cautious, helped or harmed her? The temple's justice, swayed by Pynagem's will, was a labyrinth she couldn't navigate from the estate. Midday brought a visit to the market, where Neferet bartered surplus barley for linen and oil. Thebes bustled, its stalls alive with fish, figs, and faience beads. A merchant, recognizing her as a chantress, offered a discount, his voice reverent. "Your hymns bless us, lady," he said, handing her a jar of myrrh. Neferet smiled, but the gesture stirred unease. Her temple roll elevated her, yet it tied her to a world where Pynagem's ambition clashed with the pharaoh's authority, and Akhenaten's Aten loomed. At home, Neferet joined Tai in the garden, weaving palm fronds into mats. The Nile's breeze cooled her skin, a contrast to Karnak's stone walls. "The estate thrives," Neferet said, her voice soft. "But the temple pulls me, mother. Anknes's trial, Pynagem's power, Akhenaten's rumors, they haunt me. If Ammonius' cult weakens, what becomes of us?" Thais' hands stilled, her eyes dark. "The estate is yours, Neferet, as a woman of Egypt. You can sign contracts, own land, choose your path. The temple is your calling, but not your cage. Pynagem's ambition is a storm, and Akhenaten's Aten a distant cloud. Manage this land, and you'll have strength beyond their reach." Neferet's fingers traced her amulet of Mut, Thais' words a balm. As a chantress, her voice served Ammonius, her steps watched by priests. Here, she was free, her decisions shaping the estate's future. She spent the month repairing canals, settling disputes, and checking granaries, her confidence growing with each task. Yet the temple lingered in her thoughts, Anknes's fate, Pynagem's schemes, the threat of a new god. Her freedoms as a woman were real, but her role as a chantress tied her to Karnak's uncertain destiny. One evening, Neferet visited her father, Amenemhat, in his scribe's chamber, its walls lined with scrolls. He smiled, his quill pausing. "You've done well, daughter. The estate prospers under you, and your chants honor us. But I hear of trouble in the temple. Anknes, Pynagem. Be wary." Neferet nodded, her heart heavy. "I spoke truth about Anknes, father, but I fear Pynagem's justice. And Akhenaten's Aten, could it end Ammonius' worship?" Amenemhat's face darkened. "The priest's wealth rivals the pharaoh's, but a new god could shift the sands. Your voice is Ammonius, but your land is yours. Hold both tightly." As her month ended, Neferet stood by the Nile, its waters mirroring the stars. The estate had grounded her, its demands a reminder of her freedoms, rights to own, to choose, to speak. Yet the temple called her back, its rituals her purpose, its politics her challenge. She thought of Hatshepsut, who had balanced power and faith, and Shepenwepet, whose divine role came with chains. Neferet was a chantress, her voice a gift to Ma'at, but her heart sought a path where her freedoms and duties could align. In her reed bed, Neferet clutched her sistrum, its discs silent. The Nile's embrace had strengthened her, but Karnak's pull was unrelenting. She prayed to Ammonius, her amulet warm, vowing to return with courage, to face Anknes's trial, Pynagem's ambition, and the shadows of a changing Thebes, where her voice and her choices would shape her destiny. Whispers of Aten. The torch-lit hypostyle hall of Karnak loomed like a forest of stone as Neferet stood among the chantresses, her sistrum heavy in her hand, its bronze discs silent under the weight of unease. At 16, 7 months into her role as a chantress in 800 BCE, Neferet had woven her voice into Ammonius worship, her hymns a shield for Ma'at, the cosmic order. Her month managing the family estate had grounded her in her freedoms as an Egyptian woman, but returning to the temple of Ammonius brought fresh shadows. Rumors of Akhenaten, the pharaoh's son, and his worship of the Aten, a sun disk above all gods, had reached Thebes, stirring fear among the priests and chantresses. Tonight, Pynagem, the high priest, had summoned them to strengthen the temple's resolve, and Neferet felt the tension like a taut reed. Merit, the senior chantress, faced the group, her turquoise diadem glinting in the flickering light. "Thebes stands for Ammonius Re," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "Whispers from Memphis speak of Akhenaten's heresy, a single god, the Aten, to eclipse our hidden one. We chantresses are Ammonius' voice. Our hymns will drown these rumors, binding Thebes to Ma'at." Neferet's heart quickened, her fingers tracing her amulet of Mut. Akhenaten's name had haunted her since she overheard Pynagem's defiance months ago, his ambition rivaling the pharaoh's. Anknes, now cleared of theft after the missing linen was found in a servant's quarters, stood beside her, her eyes narrowed. "Heresy or not," Anknes whispered, "Pynagem uses this to tighten his grip. He'll make us sing louder to fill his coffers." Neferet nodded, her throat tight. Anknes's trial had revealed the temple's politics, Pynagem's justice swayed by power, not truth. The high priest's wealth, controlling 2/3 of Egypt's lands, made him a king in Thebes, but Akhenaten's reforms threatened that dominion. Neferet thought of her estate, her rights to own and choose, freedoms rare beyond Egypt. Yet as a chantress, her fate was tied to Ammonius' cult, her voice a weapon in this brewing storm. Pynagem entered, his leopard skin robe shimmering, his staff tapping the stone. "Chantresses," he boomed, "Ammonius' glory is Thebes's heart. Akhenaten's Aten is a fleeting dream, but we must act. Your hymns will rally the people, your sistra banish chaos. Prepare a new chant for the harvest festival, one to proclaim Ammonius' eternal reign." Merit bowed, her voice firm. "We'll craft it, high priest. Neferet, you'll lead the melody, your voice carries Ty's strength." Neferet's breath caught, pride and fear mingling. Leading a hymn was an honor, but it thrust her into Pynagem's gaze, a place Anknes had warned was dangerous. In a side chamber, the chantresses gathered, papyrus scrolls spread before them, their ink fresh with lyrics praising Ammonius' ram-headed might. Neferet hummed a melody, her soprano weaving through Senet's high notes and Anknes's alto. Little Senet, her eyes wide, clutched her sistrum. "Will Akhenaten stop our songs, Neferet? My mother says he hates Ammonius." Neferet squeezed her hand, masking her own unease. "Ammonius been Thebes's god for centuries, Senet. Our hymns will keep him strong." Yet doubt gnawed at her. Akhenaten's Aten, a sun disk without form, challenged Ammonius' hidden power. If the pharaoh's sun rose, would Karnak's halls echo with silence? Anknes snorted, her manat beads clinking. "Pynagem doesn't care about hymns. He wants Thebes's loyalty. Akhenaten's far off, but Pynagem's here, using us to scare the nobles into more gifts." Neferet's fingers stilled on the papyrus, Anknes's words echoing her fears. The temple's wealth, granaries, herds, mines, was Pinagem's crown, but Akhenaten's heresy could topple it. As a woman of Egypt, Neferet held rights to land and voice, but her role as a chantress bound her to this conflict, her music a shield for Ammonius' cult. Days passed in fevered practice, the new hymn taking shape, its verses a defiant cry, Ammonius Re, eternal, whose breath outshines the sun. Neferet led rehearsals, her voice soaring, her sistrums clang sharp against the stone. Merit's nods grew approving, but Pinagem's visits, his eyes lingering on Neferet, stirred unease. Was he testing her loyalty, or grooming her for a role like Shepenwepet's, a god's wife, powerful yet chained? At the harvest festival, Karnak's courts thronged with Thebans, their offerings of barley and lotus piling high. Neferet stood before the altar, her sistrum raised, her heart pounding as she led the hymn. Her voice rang clear, joined by Anknes, Senate, and Merit, their sistra a chorus against chaos. The crowd joined, their voices a tide, affirming Ammonius' reign. For a moment, Neferet felt Maat's balance, her music binding Thebes to its god, drowning Akhenaten's distant whispers. Pinagem's nod was brief, but his eyes held a glint of satisfaction. After the ritual, he called Neferet aside, his voice low. Your hymn rallied Thebes, Neferet. Ammonius' cult endures because of voices like yours. Serve well, and you may rise higher. Neferet bowed, her heart racing. I sing for Ammonius, high priest, she said, echoing her mother's counsel to guard her ambition. Pinagem's words hinted at power, perhaps a role beyond Chantress, but his ambition was a web she feared to enter. In the courtyard, Neferet joined Anknes and Senate, sharing beer and figs. Senate beamed. Your hymn was beautiful, Neferet. Ammonius heard us, I know it. Anknes's smirk softened. You led well, novice. But Pinagem's praise comes with strings. Watch your step. Neferet nodded, her amulet of mut warm against her skin. The hymn had strengthened Ammonius' cult, but Akhenaten's Aten loomed, a threat she couldn't sing away. She thought of Hatshepsut, who had risen through faith and will, and Shepenwepet, whose divine role was bound by priests. Neferet's freedoms, her estate, her voice, were hers, but her role tied her to Karnak's fate. At home, Tai waited by the estate's pool, her eyes searching. The festival, daughter, did your hymn hold Thebes? It did, Neferet said, her sistrum resting in her lap. But Akhenaten's Aten grows louder, mother. Pinagem uses our songs to fight it, but I fear his ambition more than a new god. Tai's hand touched her amulet, her voice firm. Akhenaten's a shadow, but Pinagem's a storm. You're a woman of Egypt, Neferet, free to choose, to speak. Sing for Ammonius, but keep your heart your own. Neferet nodded, her resolve hardening. The temple was her sanctuary, its rituals her purpose, but Akhenaten's heresy and Pinagem's power threatened its harmony. She prayed to Ammonius, her voice a vow to defend her god with music, to navigate the temple's politics, and to hold her freedoms in a Thebes where old gods faced new challenges. The eternal harmony. The air in Karnak's outer court crackled with tension as Neferet clutched her sistrum, its bronze discs glinting under the midday sun of 800 BCE. At 16, 8 months into her role as a chantress, she had woven her voice into Ammonius worship, her hymns a bulwark for Maat, the cosmic order. The rumors of Akhenaten's Aten worship had grown louder, and the temple's resolve, bolstered by her harvest hymn, had held Thebes's loyalty. But today a crisis struck. A visiting scribe from Memphis, emboldened by Akhenaten's ideas, had publicly challenged Ammonius' supremacy in Thebes's market, calling the Aten the true god. The crowd's unrest had reached Karnak, and Pinagem, the high priest, summoned the chantresses to quell the chaos with a new hymn, one Neferet was tasked to lead. Her heart pounded with the weight of leadership and the fear of failure. Merit, the senior chantress, gathered the group in the hypostyle hall, her turquoise diadem dulled by the urgency in her eyes. "The scribe's words have stirred the people," she said, her voice low. "They question Ammonius' power, swayed by whispers of the Aten. Neferet, Pinagem chooses you to lead a hymn in the great court to silence this heresy and restore Ma'at." Neferet's breath caught, her fingers tightening on her sistrum. Leading a hymn before Thebes was an honor, but the stakes were dire. Anknes, now restored to her role after the theft accusation, leaned close, her voice sharp. "Don't falter, novice. Pinagem's using you to show his strength. Fail, and he'll cast you aside like that linen." Neferet nodded, her throat tight. Pinagem's ambition had shaped the temple's response to Akhenaten's threat, his wealth, 2/3 of Egypt's lands, his shield against the pharaoh's court. She thought of Shepenwepet, the god's wife, whose power came with chains, and her own freedoms as a woman of Egypt, land, voice, choice. As a chantress, her hymn could unify Thebes or expose her to Pinagem's wrath. Little Senet, her eyes wide, clutched Neferet's arm. "You'll sing like Hatshepsut, Neferet. Ammonius will hear you." Neferet forced a smile, her heart warmed by Senet's faith. "I'll try, Senet, for Ammonius and Thebes." She thought of Hatshepsut, whose temple at Der el-Bahri had inspired her, a woman who had balanced faith and power. This hymn was Neferet's test, her chance to lead and prove her worth. In a side chamber, Neferet worked with Merit and Anknes, crafting the hymn on papyrus. The verses proclaimed Ammonius' eternal reign, his ram-headed might outshining any sun disk. Neferet hummed a melody, her soprano soaring, blending with Senet's high notes and Anknes's alto. The rhythm was bold, the sistrums clang a call to arms, meant to drown the scribe's heresy. Merit's nod was firm. "It's strong, Neferet. Led with courage, Pinagem watches, and so does Thebes." The great court filled with Thebans, nobles in pleated kilts, farmers with reed baskets, merchants with faience beads. The scribe, a wiry man with a Memphis accent, stood bound near the altar, his eyes defiant. Pinagem, his leopard skin robe glinting, addressed the crowd, his voice booming. "Ammonius Re is Thebes's heart, eternal and unyielding. This scribe speaks of a false sun, but our chantresses will sing Ma'at's truth. Neferet, lead us." Neferet stepped forward, her sistrum raised, her heart racing. The chantresses flanked her, Merit, Anknes, Senet, their sistra gleaming. She began, her voice clear and bold, singing of Ammonius' creation, his breath shaping the Nile, his power eclipsing all rivals. The sistrum's clang echoed, sharp and rhythmic, joined by the chantress's harmony. The crowd joined, their voices a tide, drowning the scribe's whispers. Neferet's soprano soared, her eyes fixed on Ammonius' veiled shrine, feeling his ka stir, a warmth that steadied her trembling hands. The hymn ended, the court erupting in cheers, fists raised to Ammonius. The scribe's head bowed, his defiance broken, and Pinagem's nod was sharp, his eyes glinting with approval. Neferet's chest heaved, pride and relief flooding her. She had led Thebes to affirm Ammonius, her voice a shield against chaos. Anknes gripped her shoulder, her smirk softened. "You did it, novice. Thebes heard you, and Pinagem's pleased, for now." Merit approached, her face warm. "Your hymn was Ma'at's voice, Neferet. You've honored Ammonius and your mother's legacy. Rest tonight, you've earned it." In the shaded courtyard, Neferet sat with Senet, sharing beer and figs, the crowd's cheers still echoing in her ears. Senet beamed. "You were like a queen, Neferet. The Aten's gone." Neferet smiled, but Anknes's warning lingered. Pinagem's praise was a double-edged blade, his ambition a shadow over her triumph. At home, Neferet found Tai by the estate's pool, lotus flowers floating in the moonlight. Her mother's eyes searched hers. "The temple speaks of your hymn, daughter. Did you silence the Aten's whispers?" "I did," Neferet said, her sistrum resting in her lap. "The crowd sang with me, mother, but Pinagem used it to strengthen his hold. I led for Ammonius, but I fear his plans." Tai's hand touched Neferet's amulet of Mut, her voice firm. "You led with strength, Neferet, like Hatshepsut. You're a woman of Egypt, free to choose, to speak. Pinagem's ambition is a storm, but your voice is your own. Use it wisely." Neferet nodded, her heart steady but heavy. The crisis had shown her power as a leader, her hymn uniting Thebes, but Pinagem's gaze and Akhenaten's shadow loomed. She thought of her freedoms, her estate, her rights, and her role as a chantress, tied to Ammonius' fate. The temple was her sanctuary, its rituals her purpose, but its politics were a labyrinth. She prayed to Ammonius, her amulet warm, vowing to lead with courage, to guard her heart, and to forge her path in a Thebes where faith and power clashed. A legacy in song. The Nile's waters shimmered under the dawn light of 760 BCE, cradling Thebes in its eternal embrace as Neferet stood in the outer court of Karnak, her sistrum still but warm in her weathered hands. At 56, her hair now streaked with silver, she was a revered chantress, her voice a legend among the temple of Ammonius' stone columns. 4 decades had passed since her youth, when she navigated Pinagem's ambition, Akhenaten's Aten heresy, and her own dreams as a woman of Egypt. Today, she trained her daughter, Mut-Najmet, a girl of 16 whose soprano echoed Neferet's own, to carry Ammonius hymns into a new era. As she watched Mut-Najmet practice, Neferet reflected on her life, the survival of Ammonius' cult, and the legacy she wove. Into Thebes's heart. The hypostyle hall loomed behind her, its 134 columns etched with hymns that had outlasted kings and gods. Neferet's journey had begun here, her sistrums clang a nervous pulse under Merit's stern gaze. She had sung through the Opet Festival's grandeur, the beautiful festival's reverence, and a crisis that silenced an Aten scribe's heresy, her leadership cementing her place among the chantresses. Pinagem's ambition had tested her, his wealth, 2/3 of Egypt's lands, a shadow over her faith, but she had guarded her heart, singing for Ammonius, not priests. Akhenaten's reforms, bold and fleeting, had shaken Thebes, his city of Amarna rising and falling like a desert mirage. Ammonius' cult endured, its rituals unbroken, and Neferet's hymns had been a thread in that survival. Mut-Najmet stood before her, her linen dress pleated, her sistrum gleaming as she sang a hymn to Ammonius' dawn, her voice clear and strong. Neferet's chest swelled with pride, but her eyes held a flicker of worry. Thebes was stable, the pharaoh's court in Memphis aligned with Ammonius' priests, but whispers of new threats, foreign traders, shifting alliances, reached Karnak. Mut-Najmet's world would differ from Neferet's, its challenges unwritten. "Hold the rhythm, daughter," Neferet said, her voice soft but firm, echoing Tai, her mother, who had trained her. "Ammonius hears your heart, but your sistrum is his pulse. Let them align." Mut-Najmet nodded, her amulet of Mut glinting, and adjusted her grip, the sistrum's clang sharpening. Anknes, now a senior chantress with gray in her wig, watched from the sidelines, her smirk softened by years. "She's your mirror, Neferet," Anknes said, her alto warm. "But she's bolder, less afraid of priests." Neferet smiled, her heart warmed by Anknes's friendship, forged through trials like the stolen linen, when Neferet's truth had spared her. Senet, now a mother herself, joined them, her daughter a new chantress. "Mut-Najmet will lead like you, Neferet," Senet said, her eyes bright. "Your hymn against the Aten scribe, we still sing it." Neferet's thoughts drifted to that day, her voice uniting Thebes, drowning heresy in Maat's harmony. She had risen beyond a novice, her leadership earning Pynagem's respect, though she never sought his power. Shepenwepet, the god's wife, had inspired her, her divine role a crown Neferet admired but never wore, choosing instead the Chantress's freedom, her voice unbound by priestly chains. As a woman of Egypt, Neferet had managed her estate, signed contracts, and raised Mutnajmet with her husband, a scribe named Thutmosa, her rights a legacy she passed to her daughter. The morning ritual began, and Neferet joined Mutnajmet, their sistra clanging in unison, their voices weaving a hymn to Ammonius' creation. The air was thick with myrrh, the shrine's veil hiding the god's statue, but Neferet felt his ka, a warmth that had guided her through decades. The new high priest, Menkaper, a descendant of Pynagem, watched, his nod echoing his ancestors' approval. Neferet's influence had grown. She advised on hymns, trained novices, and held a seat in temple councils, her wisdom valued without compromising her faith. As the ritual ended, Neferet led Mutnajmet to the Nile's edge, where barges ferried worshippers for the day's offerings. The river sparkled, its waters eternal, and Neferet's heart swelled with gratitude. "You'll sing for Ammonius soon, Mutnajmet," she said, her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "The temple is a sanctuary, but also a labyrinth. Guard your heart, as I did." Mutnajmet's eyes, bright with youth, met hers. "You faced Akhenaten's heresy, mother, and Pynagem's power. How did you stay true to Ammonius?" Neferet's fingers traced her amulet, worn smooth by years. "I sang for Maat, not men. I held my freedoms, land, voice, choice, as a woman of Egypt. The temple tested me, but Ammonius Ka guided me, as it will you." Mutnajmet nodded, her sistrum resting in her hands. "I'll sing like you, mother, and make you proud." Neferet's eyes glistened, her heart full. She thought of Tai, whose chants had shaped her, and Hatshepsut, whose temple at Der Elbari had inspired her strength. Her life had been a hymn, trials and triumphs, faith and freedom, woven into Thebes's spirit. Ammonius' cult had endured, its rituals a heartbeat against time, and Neferet's voice had helped sustain it. At home, Neferet found Thutmosa in their garden, his scrolls spread under a palm. He smiled, his quill pausing. "Mutnajmet shines, Neferet. Your legacy lives in her." Neferet sank beside him, the Nile's breeze cooling her skin. "She'll face new shadows, Thutmosa, but she's a woman of Egypt, like me, free to choose, to sing." Ammonius' cult stands, despite Akhenaten, despite Pynagem's webs. Thutmosa touched her hand, his eyes warm. "You balance temple and home, faith and freedom. Thebes sings your hymns still." Neferet's heart swelled, her life a tapestry of Maat. She had navigated Pynagem's ambition, Akhenaten's heresy, and Anknese's trial, her voice a constant for Ammonius. Her estate thrived, her daughter rose, and her legacy endured in Karnak stone. She thought of Shepenwepet, whose chains she had avoided, and her own path, neither queen nor pawn, but a chantress whose songs shaped eternity. In her chamber, Neferet lay in her reed bed, her sistrum beside her, its discs catching the moonlight. The Nile's murmur blended with a distant hymn, a new generation's voice. She prayed to Ammonius, her amulet warm, thanking him for her journey, her trials, her triumphs, her daughter's promise. Neferet was a woman of Thebes, her voice eternal, her legacy a song that would echo through Karnak's halls, binding past and future in Maat's embrace. The song endures. The dawnlight of 750 BCE filtered through Karnak's second pylon, casting golden beams across the outer court where Mutnajmet stood, her sistrum raised, its bronze discs clanging in rhythm with her hymn. At 26, she was a chantress of Ammonius, her soprano a beacon for Maat, the cosmic order that bound Thebes's heart. Her mother, Neferet, now 66 and frail, watched from a shaded bench, her silver hair tucked beneath a linen shawl, her eyes bright with pride. 4 decades ago, Neferet had stood where her daughter did, navigating Pinagem's ambition, Akhenaten's Aten heresy, and her freedoms as a woman of Egypt. Now, as Mut-Najmet sang, Neferet reflected on her legacy, the endurance of Ammonius' cult, and the new shadows her daughter faced in a Thebes reshaped by time. The hypostyle hall's columns, etched with hymns Neferet had sung, loomed as a testament to Karnak's eternity. Her life had been a hymn, her novice days under Merit's tutelage, her leadership during the Aten scribes' crisis, her balance of temple duties and estate management. Akhenaten's monotheism had collapsed with Amarna's sands, Ammonius' cult restored under Tutankhamun and his successors. Pinagem's line still ruled Karnak, their wealth, lands, cattle, gold, unchallenged, but new tensions stirred. The Nubian pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, rising in the south, brought piety but also scrutiny, their envoys questioning Thebes's autonomy.
Mut-Najmet's role as a chantress was secure, but her path, like Neferet's, was a labyrinth of faith and politics. Mut-Najmet's hymn soared, praising Ammonius' ram-headed might, her voice blending with other chantresses. New faces, yet echoes of Anknes and Senate, now retired. Neferet's heart swelled. Mut-Najmet's melody carried her own, a legacy passed through years of training. Yet worry gnawed at her. A Nubian envoy, Piank, had arrived at Karnak, his presence stirring whispers of reform. Tighter royal control over the temple's wealth. Mut-Najmet's youth and boldness, traits Neferet cherished, could clash with such pressures. "Steady your rhythm," Neferet called softly, her voice thin but clear, echoing her mother Thais' lessons. Mut-Najmet glanced back, her amulet of mud glinting, and adjusted her sistrum, its clang sharpening. Anknes, now a temple advisor with a limp from age, approached Neferet, her smirk familiar. "She's fiercer than you were, Neferet. But Pianka's no Pinagem. He serves a king, not a god." Neferet nodded, her fingers tracing her worn sistrum, a relic of her youth. Pinagem sought power. Piank seeks order. Mut-Najmet will need wisdom, not just voice. She thought of her trials, Anknes's theft accusation, the Aten scribes' heresy, Pinagem's webs. She had guarded her freedoms, land, contracts, choice, as a woman of Egypt, passing them to Mut-Najmet, who managed the family estate with the same resolve. The ritual ended, and Mut-Najmet joined Neferet, her face flushed with effort. "Did I honor Ammonius, mother?" she asked, sinking beside her, her sistrum resting in her lap. "You did," Neferet said, her hand on Mut-Najmet's shoulder. "Your voice is Ma'at's light. But Piank watches, and the Nubians bring change. Sing for Ammonius, but tread carefully." Mut-Najmet's eyes, bright with determination, met hers. "You faced Akhenaten's heresy, mother, and Pinagem's ambition. I'll face Piank, and keep Ammonius' hymns alive." Neferet's heart warmed, but her thoughts drifted to her youth, when Thebes trembled under Akhenaten's shadow. She had led a hymn to silence an Aten scribe, her voice uniting the city, and advised Shepenwepet's successors, declining the god's wife's crown to preserve her freedom. Her estate thrived, her husband Thutmose now a chief scribe, their life a balance of temple and home. Mut-Najmet, married to a priest named Opet, faced a new Thebes, where Nubian piety clashed with priestly autonomy. In the shaded courtyard, Neferet shared bread and beer with Mut-Najmet, joined by Senet's daughter, a novice chantress. The air was thick with myrrh, the temple alive with worshippers. Anknes lingered, her voice low. "Piank wants the temple's grain records. Neferet. He's no fool. He knows our wealth rivals the pharaoh's." Mut-Najmet's bold, but boldness can burn. Neferet's stomach tightened, echoing her fears under Pinagem. "She'll learn, Anknes, as we did. Ammonius' cult endured Akhenaten. It'll endure Piank." Yet she prayed Mut-Najmet would balance faith and caution, as she had. At home, Neferet sat by the estate's pool, lotus flowers floating under the stars. Thutmose joined her, his scrolls tucked away, his eyes warm. "Mut-Najmet shines. Neferet, Your songs live in her. Neferet leaned against him, the Nile's breeze cooling her skin. She faces a new Thebes, Thutmosa. Pianka's reforms could bind the temple tighter. I faced Pinagem, Akhenaten. Her trials will differ, but she's a woman of Egypt, free as I was. Thutmosa smiled, his hand clasping hers. You shaped her, Neferet, and Thebes. Your hymns still echo in Karnak. Neferet's eyes glistened, her life a tapestry of Marat. She had sung through crises, managed her estate, and trained Mutnajmet, her voice a thread in Ammonius' eternal worship. She thought of Hatshepsut, whose temple inspired her, and Tai, whose lessons guided her. Akhenaten's Aten had faded, Pinagem's ambition tempered by time, and Neferet's legacy endured in Mutnajmet's song. In her chamber, Neferet lay in her reed bed, her sistrum beside her, its discs catching the moonlight. The Nile's murmur blended with Mutnajmet's distant hymn, practiced under the stars. Neferet prayed to Ammonius, her amulet warm, thanking him for her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, her daughter's promise. Her voice had shaped Thebes, her freedom's a gift to Mutnajmet, whose songs would carry Ammonius' light into an uncertain future. Neferet closed her eyes, her heart at peace, her legacy a Chantress' song, eternal in Karnak stone.